Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Dalet of Masechta Ayruvin, Daf 44. Wow, 44 pages of Masechta Ayruvin. Today we are discussing two primary sugyas. One we began with at the end of yesterday, which is using a person as a wall. Okay, and the second sugya being someone who exits the tchum with permission. Okay, somebody who leaves tchum with permission. There are certain cases when you're allowed to walk past the tchum on Shabbos. Then how do you get back? So that's what we're going to talk about a shtickle at the end. Chever, we're on Daf Mem Dalet Amud Aleph, about 10 or so lines into the page. Eisvei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak l'Ravos. Now, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak asks a kasha on Rava. Okay, what's his question? Nafal dofna lo yaimid ba adam behema v'chelim. Okay, so if you have a wall of a sukkah, okay, you have a sukkah. I'll tell you a secret. Sukkah is coming up soon. Good secret. Well, since Sukkah is coming up soon, what happens if your wall falls down? Can you have your friend stand there instead? Well, let's see. If the wall of his sukkah fell down, so he shouldn't say, alright, and get his friend or his animal or some other objects and put them where the wall was. And he shouldn't replace it with like a bed, because we do not make a temporary wall, a temporary enclosure, really, a temporary ohel on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, and certainly not on Shabbos. So if your sukkah falls down and it's no longer, or one of the walls even falls down and it's no longer a kosher sukkah, as we're going to see, because there aren't three walls, you have to have at least 3 walls for a sukkah. So if one of the walls falls down, so then you may not replace it on Yom Tov, and that includes with, and certainly not on Shabbos, that includes with a person. So now we had said yesterday at the end, right? Remember there was that incident with Reb Nechemia Breda of Chanilai, that he was absorbed in his learning and he accidentally went outside of the Tchum Shabbos, and they figured that if they just make a wall of human beings, well then he can, use that enclosed area to get back into the Tchum Shabbos. So, and that seemed to be acceptable. There's no issue of making a wall out of humans. Yet, over here we seem to be saying, do not make a wall out of a human. If your sukkah falls down, don't use a human to fix that. So apparently it's a problem to make human walls, human ohels on Shabbos. Amalei, so Rava says to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Ad amad li meha. Well, you're asking me a kasha against making human walls from that brisa. Well, vana min alach meha. I will bring a brisa supporting making human walls. Here's the brisa. Osa adam es chaveru dofen. A person is allowed to make his friend into a wall. Kedei sheyochal v'yishta v'yashin, so that he can eat, drink, and sleep, right? Meaning, so if you have a fellow and he's in a sukkah and he needs an extra wall, so he's allowed to ask his friend and say, hey friend, how good of a friend are you? Can you just stand there and don't move? I'm just gonna eat I'm just gonna eat something quickly, or I'm just gonna sleep for a few minutes. Anyways, so what are we saying? So again, Osa Adam is Chaver Dofen, a person can make his friend a wall, so that he can eat, his sukkah is missing a wall, he's allowed to have his friend stand in for him as a wall so that he can eat, drink, and sleep. And he can also use a bed instead, or he could spread out some kind of a sheet as a wall, so that the sun doesn't shine directly, either if there's a corpse there or on food. So these two brises seem to be contradicting each other, right? The first brisa says you may not use a human as a wall. The second brisa seems to be saying that you may use a human as a wall. Okay. So the Gemara answers lo kasha, it's no problem. Rabbi Eliezer harabanan. So it's a machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan. The first brisa, which says that you may not use a human as a wall, is like Rabbi Eliezer. The second brisa, which says that you may use a human as a wall, is like the Rabbanan. Who could tell me what this machlokas is between Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan? Think. I'm kidding. I don't really think that you'll remember it, but well, I do. I assume that you'll remember it, but not. Okay. We had a machlokas in Masechta Shabbos. Do you remember? There's a machlokas about can you close if you have a window in a house. What's a window? A window is basically just a hole in the wall. So you have some kind of thing that you stick into the window to plug it up, to close, to block out the light. So the question is, can you stick this thing into the window to block out the light on Shabbos? So like this, like window shutter. So the Tanan is we learn in the Mishnah Pekaka Chalon. So there's window shutter. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Bismacha Kosher Vitali. Remember this? As long as it is both tied and dangling, poking bow, then you can use it to block the window, to stick into the window and close it and stuff it up, whatever. V'imlav, but if it's not both dangling and tied, so then ein poking bow, you cannot use it because if it's tied and dangling, it's clear that it was already part of the binyan from before Shabbos, and you're not adding anything to any binyan, right? This is just part of the structure. However, if it's not both dangling and tied, so then we have to be concerned about adding to a structure on Shabbos. Whereas v'chacham omen benkach uvenkach poking bow. Whereas the chacham don't have a problem using this shutter. Remember, it was the question is, does it mean that according to chacham does it have to be is it just that it doesn't have to be dangling, but it have to be tied, or maybe it doesn't have to be tied at all, whatever it is. But they don't have an issue with using this shutter on Shabbos. But Rabbi Eliezer does have an issue. No, so we want to say that here's the thing. So that first brisa had said that you're not allowed to use a human as a wall for the sukkah because you're not allowed to make an oil arai on Yom Tif and certainly not on Shabbos. Now that would be in line with Rabbi Eliezer, who says that you're not allowed to put this shutter in the window. So we see that he says that you're not allowed to make an oil arai. So that would be in line. So Rabbi Eliezer and the first brisa would make sense. And then the Chachamim, who seem to not have an issue with using this window shutter, they would be like the second brisa, which says that you'd be allowed to make this, you'd be allowed to use a human as a wall for a sukkah. Apparently there is no issue with making an ohel arai on Yom Tif to make this wall of a sukkah. Okay. According to the second brisa. Now, but the Gemara says that's not a good connection, right? Do not compare the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim regarding this window shutter with the these two brises about using a human as a wall for a sukkah. How come? Because V'ha itmar Allah, it was stated upon the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. Amar Rabbi Bar Bachana, Rabbi Yochanan, Akol Modim. Everyone agrees she'ein osan oel aray b'tchila b'yom tiv ve'in tzarich lomar b'Shabbos. That in the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim by the window shutter, everyone agrees, even the Chachamim agree, that you may not construct an ohel arai on Yom Tif and certainly not on Shabbos. Okay, and therefore, in the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, even the Chacham would agree that you may not, milechatchila make an ohel arai on Yom Tiv or Shabbos, and therefore they would not. Nobody there would agree with our second brisa, which says that you'd be allowed to use a human as a wall for a sukkah. Lo nechliku ela, the machlokes in Rabbi Eliezer and the Chacham over there is by something else. El lahosif. The question is, can you add on to an already existing ohel on Shabbos? Rabbi Eliezer Omer ein mosifin b'yom tiv ve'in tzarich lomar b'Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer says that you're not allowed to even add on to an existing structure on Yom Tif and certainly not on Shabbos. And therefore he says that in order for you to be able to use this window shutter, it would have to already be both tied to this structure and dangling. Whereas the Chacham say you're allowed to add on Shabbos and then certainly on Yom Tov. But the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chacham over there is about, can you add onto an already existing structure? Nobody over there would say that you'd be allowed to make a structure milichatchila, even if it's just arai. Nobody says that you'd be allowed to do that on Shabbos or Yom Tov, and therefore, in the machlokes in Rabbi Eliezer and the Chacham, we're not going to be able to find anybody who would agree with our second brisa, which says that you'd be allowed to have your friend stand in for a wall of your sukkah on Yom Tov. So Ella lo kasha akrab Meir akrab Yehuda. So the Gemara says, okay, fine. So we struck out with trying to say that one brisa is Rabbi Eliezer and one brisa is a Chacham. So now they're going to try and say that one brisa is Rabbi Meir and the other brisa is Rabbi Yehuda. Let's see. The Tanya's, we learn in the brisa, Asar lebehema dofen l'sukkah. If a person wants to use an animal as the wall of his sukkah, Rabbi Meir posel Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Meir says that it will not work because we have to be the animal is a flight risk. We are worried that the animal will run away and you will be stuck without a sukkah. So you may not use a animal as a wall for a sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda says it would be acceptable. So now says the Gemara, Rabbi Meir de kapasil hasam. So Rabbi Meir who says that over there, where if you use an animal as a wall for your sukkah, he says it's possible. Amalav mechitzi. So we see that, okay, the issue is that using an animal as a wall, so it won't make a good mechitza. But, however, in terms of making an ohel arai, it's not a problem, right? Meaning, when it comes to a sukkah, if you only have two walls in the sukkah, and you need a third wall, and you use an animal for the third wall, so Reb Meir is going to say it's not going to work because the animal could run away. But in terms of making an ohel arai, the fact that this animal is going to be making an ohel arai, he's going to be making a structure, he doesn't have an issue with ohel arai, right? And therefore he could be the author of our second brisa, which doesn't seem to have an issue with making an ohel arai on Yom Tov. So the lav midi ka'avid, right? Because he's not doing anything wrong by having the animal there, right? It's going to be not going to be a kosher sukkah, but in terms of making ohel arai, it's no problem. Rabbi Yehuda de kamachshir hasam. Now Rabbi Yehuda, who over there says that using an animal as the wall of a sukkah is kosher. Well, then clearly it is a mechitza hacha asar, and therefore it is going to be a problem of making an ohel on, and he says it's going to be a problem of making an ohel on Yom Tov, and therefore he will be the author of the first brisa, which says that you're not allowed to use a person as a wall on Yom Tov because it's like making an ohel and it's going to be a problem. Okay, so that's what we want to say for now. But the Gemara throws it out. But the Gemara asks the kasha, 1 second. Emor de Shama said Reb Meir behema. Reb Meir says that you can't use an animal for the wall of a sukkah because it might run away. Therefore, since you can't use it as an animal, well then it's not. It is an animal. Since you can't use it as the wall of a sukkah, well then you're really not right. You're not right. Lo midi ka'avid. He's not doing anything, so therefore it would be acceptable, and it's not an issue of ohel arai. But adam v'chelim mishamasle. But what about people? People, Reb Meir theoretically would say that you would be able to use as the wall of a sukkah. It would be a kosher wall since he'll just stand there, and he would say that therefore it's an actual mechitza, and it will be a problem on Yom Tov. Yet, if we're saying that he's the author of that second brisa, but the second brisa says that you would be allowed to use a human as a wall on Yom Tov. Visu and more so Reb Meir aliba deman. Now, who's Reb Meir going like? From the earlier argument between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, right? Ye aliba de Rabbi Eliezer lahosif nami aser. Right? Now, interestingly, Rashi points out that Reb Meir was also a student of Rabbi Eliezer, which is super interesting. It's like Reb Meir was a student of everybody. Student of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Sandaf Yud Gimel was a student of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel, and apparently now he was also a student of Rabbi Eliezer. He was also a student, I think, of Elisha ben Avuya, Acher, because he had a lot of teachers. Anyways, but we want to say that he doesn't want to disagree with his teacher Rabbi Eliezer. Now, right, if we're saying that according to Reb Meir, you'd be allowed to make an ohel arai, well, Yelib Rabbi Eliezer lahosif nami aser. Rabbi Eliezer says, not only are you not allowed to make an oil arai, you can't even add on. Rabbi Eliezer says you can't even add on to an existing oil. Right? So okay, so maybe Rabbi Eliezer says, maybe Rabbi Meir says like the Chacham, but Amar the Amir Rabbanan lahosif. The Rabbanan said that you can add this shutter, this window shutter, to add to an existing structure. But lechatchila miyamur, would they say that you're allowed to add that you're allowed to just make a wall milchatchila? So ella av harabanan. Okay, so you cannot. Wow. Okay, we kind of tried to say that maybe those two brises are Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. It's that is not going to work. Ella av harabanan. Rather, they're both the rabbis. V'chelim achelim lo kasha. And if we look at those two brises, the first brisa said that you would not be allowed to use kalim, like utensils, as a wall on Yom Tov if the wall of your sukkah falls down. The other brisa says that you would be allowed to use kalim, right, in order to protect like food or a corpse. So lo kash, it's no problem. Habadof and shlishis, habadof and revius. It depends. If it's the third wall, i.e., if it's mamish necessary in order to make it a proper sukkah, well then it would be a problem. And that's what the first brisa is talking about. But the second brisa, which says that you would be allowed to use kalim as a wall, that would be talking about the as a fourth wall, i.e., not an integral wall, and that's why you'd be allowed to use these utensils. Right? We look at the first brisa, it says, Tavka says, if a wall fell down, so then you would not be allowed to use kalim as the third wall. So we see that is talking about an integral wall, and that's why it's not allowed. But the second brisa, which says that you are allowed to use utensils, it's talking about the fourth wall, which is not an integral wall. El adam ba'adam kasha. No, but how do you answer adam adam? Right? The first brisa says that you would not be allowed to use a human, and the second brisa says that you would be allowed to use a human, and you cannot answer it the same way to say that the second brisa is talking about the fourth wall, because it specifically says there that you're using a human so that this person who's in this sukkah can now eat and drink and sleep, i.e., without his friend standing in as a wall, he wouldn't have a kosher sukkah. So it's talking about the third wall, clearly. So how do you answer that? So, Adam nami lo kasha, this is also no problem. Kan ladas, kan shelo midas. It depends if the person knew or not. If the person who's standing in as the wall knows that he's being used as a wall, so then it is a problem. And that's what the first brisa is talking about. But the second brisa, where it says that it's allowed, it's when this fellow does not know that he's being used as a wall. So, that's why it's permitted. But one second, the story with Rabbi Nechemia, when he got stuck outside of the Tchum Shabbos, and they made a human wall to get him out, well, didn't the people being used as a human wall know that they were being used as a human wall? So, Shalom Midasava. No, they also didn't know. But Rav Chisda was there. He must have known that he's being used as a human wall, especially since he was organizing the whole thing. So, Rav Chisda Shalom and Aminin Hava. Rav Chisda wasn't actually one of the human wall people, so that's why it was acceptable. Okay, so we seem to see that you can make a human wall as long as the people being used for the human wall do not know that they are being used for a human wall. There were these bnei ganana. We had the bnei ganana the other day. They are these chuppah makers. So you had these chuppah makers, and they were bringing in water using a human wall. Okay. Nagdinu Shmuel, and Shmuel gave them malchus. Shmuel beat them up a shtickle. Wow, don't mess with Shmuel. Omer, he said, right? No, if you're allowed to make human walls when the people involved do not know that they're being used as human walls, well then, but that doesn't mean that you're allowed to use human walls when they do know that they're being used as human walls. And interestingly, we saw in Daf Mem Amud Aleph that we were concerned about these chuppah makers, that maybe they weren't B'nai Torah. So I guess Shmuel was kind of being mocked over there and giving them malchus. Yikes. Hanu zike dahavu shadyan biristka de mechoza. So there were these like containers of wine that were out in the main street of Mechoza, okay, which is where Rava lived, and Rava was in the wine business, lemaisa. Ba'ad da'asa Rava mi pirkei, and while Rava was going back from giving a shir, linu niale, they assumed, well, there's all these people coming back with Rava, we can theoretically say that we can make a human wall over here, and then we can bring back these containers of wine for Rava. They were Rava's containers. And since they were a human wall, it was acceptable. And the people that were making the wall, I guess, didn't realize that they were making the wall. So the Shabbos Achrise by Aylinu, but then came the next Shabbos, and I guess the same situation happened, and they wanted to bring in these wine vessels, but V'asalu, Rava said, don't do it, Dehava le kiladas, because it would be like they know already. Meaning the first week you can argue that nobody knows what's going on, they didn't realize that they were being used for human walls. But by the second week already, I guess you would have to assume that they know that they're being used for human walls. Levi Ailule Tivna Zire Aspasta Rav Shimi bar Chia Maya. So Levi, they would bring for him like straw. Zeiri, they would bring some other kind of plant, and Rav Shimi bar Chia, they would bring water. All of this stuff in human walls. So, alright, I guess human walls could be acceptable. New Mishnah. Mishiyatza B'Rishus. So if you have a fellow that left the Tchum Shabbos with permission, okay. Now there are situations where you're allowed to leave the Tchum Shabbos with permission. There's situations where you're allowed to leave Tchum Shabbos with permission. One example being, if you're doing like Kiddush HaChodesh, right? If you're gonna like go to Jerusalem to say that you saw the moon. So if you see the moon on Shabbos, so you'd be allowed to travel to Jerusalem, even though it's outside of the Tchum Shabbos. So if you have somebody who left the Tchum Shabbos with permission, the Amrulo Kvar Naisa Maise, and then they report to this person, like, oh yeah, no need to go, it's already been taken care of, right? Imagine he's going to give his testimony about the moon, then he finds out on the way, like, oh yeah, no need to go, like, people already testified about it. So now what? He basically left his Tchum Shabbos with permission, but now he finds out that there's really no need for him to continue, and he's stuck in the middle of nowhere. So Yesh La Alpayim Amot L'chol Ruach. So now he's okay, so he's allowed to walk 2,000 Amos in any direction. Alright, I mean, hopefully that'll help. I mean, okay, could be he's pretty far away. But and then we say, but if he still is within his Tchum Shabbos, it's as if he never left, and the Gemara is going to talk about what that means. And the Gemara says, anybody goes out in order to save, so then they can go back to where they came from. Interesting. Okay. Says the Gemara, what does it mean that if he's still within his Tchum Shabbos, it's like he never left his Tchum Shabbos? Duh. Like, if he's still within his Tchum Shabbos, then it's like he never left his Tchum Shabbos. Isn't that kind of obvious? So Amar Rabba Hachikam. Rabba says this is what it means. What he says is that dummy. So if he's still within his Tchum Shabbos, then it's Ki'ilu he never left his house. Okay, Pshita, but that's also obvious. What's the Chiddush? So here's the Chiddush. I may have thought that, meaning the Mishnah said that if you leave your Tchum Shabbos with permission, and then you find out that you don't need to go anymore, so then wherever you find out, you have 2,000 Amos from there. So I may have thought to say that once he leaves his house on a mission that he's allowed to go on, well then, once he finds out that there's no reason to go anymore, well, even if he's still within his Tchum Shabbos, you might think that that's where his 2,000 Amos, they kind of get moved to that place. So what Rabbi is saying is that, no, that the whole thing of his 2,000 Amos being moved to where he is right now is only if he already left his Tchum Shabbos. But if he's still within his Tchum Shabbos, he could just go back home, and it's like nothing happened. Rav Shimon bar Chia Amar. So Rav Shimon bar Chia says something interesting, which is Hachika Amar, that this is what the Mishnah is saying. So Rav Shimon bar Chia says something interesting, which is that the Chachamim said that you are right, that basically the Mishnah had said that wherever he finds out that he doesn't need to continue on his journey because it's already been taken care of, so then he has 2,000 Amos from that place in any direction. So what Rav Shimon bar Chia is saying, that the Mishnah is saying, is that if from where he is right now, 2,000 Amos towards his city would overlap at all with the 2,000 Amos that, from within his city, i.e., essentially he's within 4,000 Amos of his city, well then he can mamish walk all the way home. Right? Even though from where he is right now, his city is 4,000 Amos away, and he can only walk 2,000 Amos, but as long as it overlaps a little bit with his city, well then he can mamash just walk all the way home. What's the machlokes between Rabba and Rav Shimon bar Chia? So Marsavar Avloas Truman Milsei, Marsavar Lav Milsei. Well, Rav Shimon bar Chia says that overlapping Truman is a thing, and if they overlap, then you're allowed to walk mamish the entire way, to the end of the further Trum. Whereas Rabba says overlapping Trumim is not a thing, and therefore you could still only go to the end of the 2,000 Amas, right? Meaning, so Rabba would say that if you're outside of Tchum Shabbos and you find out that you don't need to go anymore, so you have 2,000 Amas in any direction, but even though it overlaps with the original Tchum Shabbos, you won't be able to walk home. Fine. Abaye says to his Rebbe Rabba, he says, one second, don't you agree as well that overlapping Tchumen is a thing, and therefore you can walk to the end of the further Tchum? What if he spends Shabbos in a cave? That inside the cave is 4,000 Amas, and above the cave is less than 4,000 Amas. Don't you agree that he will be able to walk the entire upper part of the cave and also pass the 2,000 Amas? What does this mean? So in order for us to understand this, we need to look at a diagram. We haven't looked at a diagram in a few days, which I'm certainly not going to complain about. But anyways, we have a diagram here on 44b3, although it's only a diagram for this daf, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. You can see there this cave. This cave is underground, okay? Now, the shape of the cave is interesting. It's almost, right, the walls kind of slope, as they go, almost like a pyramid, right? As they go up, they get thinner. So what you have, Lamaisa, is that inside the cave, at the bottom, so you have 4,000 Amas, okay? 4,000 Amas in the cave, and you can walk inside of the entire cave. But now when you get up to ground level, there's two exits to the cave, okay? Now, the area between the two exits, right, are, less than 4,000 Amas, but more than 2,000 Amas. So, now here's the thing. So, let's say so the shape of this cave is that as it kind of goes up, it gets smaller, right? Which means that the area above the cave is less than 4,000 Amos, right? Now, by each entrance / exit, however you want to look at it, to this cave, so he can go 2,000 Amos in either direction, right? So, Kilu, outside of the cave in either direction, he can go 2,000 Amos, but also that area above the cave, right? So from each entrance, he can go 2,000 Amos. But the distance between each exit is going to be more than 2,000 Amos. It's going to be, slightly less than 4,000 Amos. So, in general, you wouldn't be able to walk that whole distance. However, what we're saying, though, is that since these two 2,000 Amos areas are overlapping, you would actually, let's say you left the cave on the right entrance, the eastern entrance, you would actually mamash be able to walk all the way across to the other entrance, even though it's like almost 4,000 Amos. That would be acceptable, and you can then even continue past that 2,000 Amos in the other direction. So we see that when you have these two overlapping Tchumen, right, the 2,000 Amos, let's say from the right exit, and the 2,000 Amos from the left exit, they overlap on top of above the cave, and you can mamish walk that entire area above the cave, and then even continue in whatever direction you use walking an additional 2,000 Amos past the other door. So we see that as long as the tchums overlap, you can mamish continue walking, as opposed to if between those two doors there was 4,000 Amos or more, i.e. the 2,000 Amos from each doorway did not overlap with one another, then you would not be able to walk from one door above ground to the other door, because there's no overlapping tchumen. You would have to go back into the cave, walk, through the cave, and then exit on the other side. So we see that so Abai is asking Rabba, wouldn't you agree that in this cave, where above ground the 2,000 Amos from each entranceway overlap, so wouldn't you agree that you'd be able to walk above ground from door to door, even though it's more than 2,000 Amos? So let's read that again. So Abai says to Rabba, Vadlo Tizba, don't you agree that Avloas Tchumen Milsahi, that overlapping Tchumen is significant? If he spent Shabbos in this cave, that at the bottom of it there's 4,000 Amos, Ve'al gaga pachos me'abas alef amma, and above the cave there's less than 4,000 amas. Lo nimtza mahalach es kula v'chutz alpayim amma. Wouldn't you be able to walk from door to door on top of the cave? And even then, let's say you left out let's say you exit on the right door, you'd be able to walk left all the way to the other door and then keep on walking even an additional 2,000 amas. So Amarle, Rabbi answers Abaye. He says, yeah, I agree that there we would say overlapping tchumen, but velo shanilach. But Abaye, don't you make a distinction where you actually started spending, when you spent Shabbos, you were in this cave already and surrounded by these walls. And when Shabbos came in, the overlapping reality was there from the beginning. Right? And that's different than this case where these aren't, when Shabbos started, these you were home and then you left your tchum with permission, but now you're in a completely separate area, right? And it's not like when you started Shabbos, you were already in these overlapping areas. This overlapping reality only came later when you found out that after you already left the Tchum Shabbos, that the mission you were on was already accomplished, and now you're stuck in a completely new area, which is different than where you started Shabbos. It happens to be overlapping where you started Shabbos, but you started Shabbos in one area. You now find yourself in a different area, which technically happened to be overlapping, but that's different than when you started Shabbos in an area that has two overlapping sections. Rabbah agrees that in that situation it will be permitted. But when these overlapping realities happen separately, then you would not be able to apply them. And that is why Rabbah is saying that even though his new location overlaps with where he started Shabbos, when he leaves his Tchum Shabbos, it would not be acceptable and he would not be able to make his way home. So let us do a quick review of Daf Mem Daled. So Daf Mem Daled talks about using a person as a wall, and ultimately we said if he's aware that he's being used as a wall, then it's a problem. But if he's not aware that he's being used as a wall, then it would be okay. And then we talk about somebody who exits the Tchum with permission. Okay. So if he's allowed to leave the Tchum, but then he finds out that his mission was cancelled. So if Rabbi says, look, as long as he's still within his original Tchum, so then it's as if he never left the Tchum and it's fine. He goes home. We don't change anything. It's like nothing happened. Rishon Bar Chia says, actually, even if where he finds himself now, it's with, his new Tchum that he's allowed overlaps with his original Tchum, he'd be able to walk all the way home. Alright, that was Daf Mem Daled from Masechta Ayruvin. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.